What is going on, Heat Seekers? We've got a laid back show today. We had a last minute sick call off work
We went
day
to the
for
bullpen.
Thomas and brought in the lefty from the pen, the hard throwing lefty Brad Menendez, as I'm sure everybody watching knows who Brad is, because
As we've spent quality years together now.
his face has been all over this channel for 4 years now. We don't have any specific subject. We're kind of gonna wing it and take questions for the whole show. Hopefully, have a couple nice segments in here. But Brad, how you doing?
No complaints, man. Just pounding out some awesome content for RotoHeat.com and our YouTube channel. Trying to keep people informed as we're hot and heavy in rookie season. Already through 2 league drafts. Even had my home league draft where we got everyone together for the first time in a long time. And I will say, PSA, if you don't have an in-person draft, you're missing out, man. It's such a good time. I know, obviously, Rick and I have one we do in the summer together with some guys in the area, but man, it's such a good time getting people together to draft and just kind of chop it up, have some food and hang out, and man, it's a blast to do. But otherwise, I mean, life's good. It's getting a summer out here. We're finally getting some warm weather. How's it going in your world?
Yeah, it's same. Been busy. I hear the daughter cheering in the background. She must have got an A on her test or something. That's good. But yeah, I mean, just staying busy. We got all of the leagues that I run. We start like half of them on Saturday, the rookie drafts, and then the other half of the leagues we start on Sunday. But I do have something that's going to be coming to the channel here real soon that I think people are going to really enjoy. I don't want to give too much away, but it will be unique. I'm going to be a little vulnerable, and it'll be a little different than what I've seen out here on the YouTube streets in regards to fantasy content. So I'm a little excited about that. But yeah, I mean, we just we're pushing along. I'm getting my consistency reports out. This starts with me going, I'm going to figure out some easy way to write an article that's got a lot of information on it. And then the next thing I know, I'm 4 hours deep into the top 36 consistent receivers and just dropped the 24 most consistent running backs from 2022 last night. And we got QBs and tight ends coming up this weekend, but it was fun to get back in the writing chair. And I don't get to do it as much as I would like. That's how this whole thing started, right? Was writing some articles and having some fun with that. But it was it turns into a lot of hours and it gets away from me a little bit, but it's super fun.
It is, and just trying to get the information together. I feel like I spend half my time just kind of researching, and then as I'm putting the article together, I mean, because I did, the IDP to UDFAs will drop next week on the website, and just looking at the guys I liked pre-draft, looking at our rankings on the site pre-draft, it was like, okay, it takes me forever to just kind of decide who the guys are, then put them down, then put some information. It's like, it's a blast, but it's a lot.
Yeah, I think people expect you to sit down and you're like, hey, hit the enter key, and then there's this beautiful article done for you. And they don't realize the amount of studying and thought that goes into, the majority of the articles. Now, not all of them have to be think pieces, but
we're not Chat GPT here, right? We don't AI it up. We got to think.
Yeah, especially since all the AI is like too old, and it'll be like, yes, you should draft Frank Gore.
Number 1. Yeah, no, very true. It's wild. It's that's the fun part about it is not only creating it and putting it out there, but then talking to people about it. It's one of those things where not everyone has the same opinion, but I like that it gives opportunity to have conversation, because I think that's kind of lost in fantasy, is that people put their ideas out and then people troll it. But those people that are kind of in the middle that just want to talk about it, that's the people I love talking to, because you get them online. Like, I dropped AFC North draft grades on the draft countdown site, and somebody actually responded with a real comment. I was like, this is good. Let's talk, and it's not a trolling thing. So trolls I don't like, but people that want to talk, I can deal with that.
Well, you know me, I'm a smart ass, so if you troll me, I'm gonna troll back.
Very, very, very true.
Hey, if you don't want the heat, stay out the kitchen. That's the way I see it. And us, like, we're putting ourselves out there. Like, it's expected. I'm like not like angry at people, but I mean, we can have a little fun, banter back and forth, and give each other shit. And I'm not gonna take too much offense to it. But Thomas has a question, so he's sick, skips the show, and then comes in asking questions that I can't even answer because none of my rookie drafts have started yet. But Brad, you said you've had 2 of them.
I have had 2 of them. I'm pulling them up right now.
Yeah, go ahead and find us a pick or 2 that you either thought was a guy that went far too late or a guy that went far too early.
All right, so I'm going on to my sleeper league. This is my home league. It's 8 rounds, but it's got full IDP, so there's IDP in here, but we're not going to talk about IDP in this one. I will say, I think Zach Charbonnet went at 110, and I feel like he's one of those names that, and I'm not going to say that was too early or too late because I like Zach Charbonnet, but he's one of those that I feel like it's super flex. So I'll tell you the first round picks just so that we have an idea of where we're at. Bijan went 1, Jahmyr Gibbs went 2. Then it was Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud in that order. Then Jackson Smith and Jigba. I took Kendre Miller at the 1-7 because I'm all sorts of reaching. I love Kendre Miller. It. Jordan Addison went 1-8, and then Will Levis went 1-9, and Zach Charbonnet at 110. So I like Zach Charbonnet. I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to see the real value of him, period, right? Because Kenneth Walker's going to eat touches. What are we thinking? 200 touches for him easily? What is Zach Charbonnet's workload going to look like? So is that a reach expecting a startable player and you're drafting a guy who's going to be in a handcuff with a really nice running back? What do you think?
I think people overthink it a lot because very few running backs are going to get all of the work. And I don't think that they're going to just sit Charbonnet behind Walker with the draft capital that they spent on Charbonnet. And I think he's good. I mean, this was a guy that a lot of people had as the RB3 in this class before the draft. And the only reason why he's not there right now is because they fear Kenneth Walker. Well, Walker is good, but Seattle has had so many injuries at the running back position over the last few years. I think they are in the mindset of let's try to keep our running backs fresh. Let's split the workload and keep them healthy for the entire season. And I think he's going to get work, and he may not be a high-end RB2, but I think that he has a pretty good chance of, having back-end RB2 or flex startability, which is still valuable. And when you're talking about draft picks, like you're lucky if you get somebody that you can start half the season after you get past, 105, 106 in this draft. We don't know what's going to happen with a lot of these guys. We could say the same thing about Kendre Miller, right? They've got Alvin Kamara, who we're waiting to see if he is going to be suspended or not. And they have Jamal Williams, who has been a damn good running back over the past, I think, 4 straight years that he's been a running back 3 or better. And last year we saw, a lot of touchdowns from him. That was a big aspect of his
huge bump.
RB13, I think he was, but he's a quality producer as well. So, we're looking at, and then if you go a little bit further, I don't know if Roschon Johnson went where he went in your draft, but he's in a similar position for his rookie year, but I still like him a lot. So I think I just don't see Seattle using that draft capital if they don't plan on using them. I don't think it's similar to the Rashad Penny draft where, he struggled with pass protection. early and couldn't get on the field because he was unhealthy. If Charbonnet and Walker are both healthy, I think they both get a decent amount of work in this offense.
Yeah, when you look at and I'll tell you about Roschon after, but when you look at the amount of carries that Seattle has for their running backs, you're looking at, there was over 100 running back attempts to anybody outside of Kenneth Walker. So DJ Dallas is still on the roster, right? Like they still got Travis Homer. I mean, they have some of these other guys that got some action, but I think where Charbonnet can really add extra value is potentially in the passing game. I mean, the running backs were still getting, 40, 50-ish targets in the passing game to go with the rushing attempts opposite of Kenneth Walker. So I think there's value to be had there. I just don't know that I feel comfortable doing it inside of the top 10. I think it's got to be 10 to kind of 15, 16 overall range for Charbonnet, but which I don't hate where he landed at 110. I just thought it was an interesting spot because he's been such an up and down name since the draft because of landing spot.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a little bit overblown. I think that there has been more passing in Seattle because of the amount of Homer, DJ Dallas that had to play with Rashad Penny out, Walker missing a little bit of time. Before that, Chris Carson injured. It's been going on for quite a while in Seattle where they haven't had healthy backs, and they've had to use multiple backs, multiple seasons in a row because of that. But talent is what matters, right? If Charbonnet's as good as we thought he was before the draft, he's going to get an opportunity. The draft capital's there. Like, yes, it's not 8th or 12th, but it's still good
premium
draft capital for a running back. Like, those guys are just in a different stratosphere. They're the outliers. Where Charbonnet fell is like your typical running back. Like, a lot of first running backs in drafts have been around that area, and he was still the third running back taken. So there's a lot of value there with him. I think Seattle's going to use him. Michael Eastman wants to know, will Jonathan Taylor be back to his old self again this season? I think yes. And I thought that last season was much worse than it was until I was working on the running back consistency report over the past couple days. Now, we all know going into last season, the Indianapolis Colts were supposed to have one of the, top 2 or 3 offensive lines in football. And that didn't happen. They did not play their best. They should be better in 2023. That offensive line should not be as bad as it was. Jonathan Taylor, though, if you look up his stats, it'll say 12 games played, but in week 18, he had no touches. He had no opportunities. And then I think it was week 16, because I think he missed a week. It might have been 15. But he only had 1 reception for 13 yards. So 2 of those games, he only had 1 touch in those. So battled some injuries. In the other 10 games, he had 3 running back 1 weeks, 4 running back 2 weeks, and only 3 where he fell outside of the top 24. For those 10 games. Now, if you count the 12, then obviously he had 6 outside the top 24. But the production was still there, even though it wasn't as high end as we had seen the previous year when he ran for, 1,800 yards and 15 touchdowns or whatever it was. But now I think Anthony Richardson is going to be starting fairly soon. I don't think that he's going to be on the sidelines for very long. That's going to add and help the efficiency of the run game, as we see in Philadelphia. I mean, the Chicago Bears were the leading rushing team last year, even though they were bad and the worst team in the league, because Justin Fields helps that out. We've seen it in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, and in Buffalo with Josh Allen. Those rushing offenses, because the defense has to worry about the quarterback so much, it helps the efficiency of the run game. And I think that's what we're going to see with Anthony Richardson. He may be the most physically gifted out of all those quarterbacks that I mentioned. And that's going to give him some leeway. That's why I think we're going to see him on the field earlier than a lot of people think. I know some people think they are going to sit him for the entire year and go with Minshew. And I'm sorry, just the physical attributes that Richardson has gives you a better chance to win games than Minshew does. And
don't you ever say another bad thing about Minshew Mania, all right?
I'm just saying, like, look, I mean, even though the Bears only had 3 wins last year, they had 7 losses that were, one score or less. So Fields, just with his, ability to run and keep the defense on its toes, kept the Bears in a lot of games, because we know after the Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn trades that the defense was just abysmal. Right. So that's what that quarterback can do. And we saw the same thing with Hurts when he first came in. We saw Baltimore go from not very good to winning games when Lamar first came in. Like, that's just what those players help you do. They keep the defense on their toes and helps everything else out. So I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be fine. He's still my running back 1 in fantasy right now. What about you?
When you look at, so Shane Steichen, the new coach of the Colts, comes from Philly. Everybody knows that. That's a team that's normally in the top 3 to 5 when it comes to rushing attempts, rushing yards. I mean, they're predicated on setting up the pass with the run. So whether or not it's Minshew, Richardson, whoever's under center, they're going to lean on the run game. I would probably project Jonathan Taylor more like in the 12 to 1,400 yard range. I can't imagine them literally giving him so much rushing attempts that he gets to 1,800 yards. So I would be a little less aggressive on the super high end production, but I do think that Steichen brings a system that's very run friendly over, and I think their offensive line is better than it played last year. I mean, there are really strong pieces on that offensive line, and they tried to help bolster that in the offseason. So I'm with you. I think Jonathan Taylor should be back to probably RB1 potential. I know that he really hurt everybody last year with the injuries and the ineffectiveness and the team just being really struggling last year, but I'm perfectly fine saying, JT is an RB1 and probably RB1 when everything's said and done, because as much as I love Christian McCaffrey, I mean, history tells us that, when he gets as much action as he got last year, this year might be a little tougher for him to get that kind of production. So give me Jonathan Taylor as a top-end RB. Give me Steichen bringing a really run-friendly offense. I just want to know who the RB2 in this system is going to be, because he has potential value as well. Probably Anthony Richardson when everything's said and done, because I expect him to be heavily involved in the run game. But is there somebody else that they use a lot? Maybe
Evan Hull
Evan Hull from Northwestern, or I can't imagine. I mean, Zach Moss is probably still on his way to the stadium now at this point, getting ready for week 1, so he might not be that. But great question, Michael, and I think it's a good question to ask.
And we can piggyback off that, because Thomas, brought up, and I did say Jonathan Taylor was my RB1 in that whole thing, and Thomas said, Bijan is Dynasty RB1 for most people, quote unquote consensus. But Rick mentioned last week Bijan isn't his RB1. Why not? And who is it? Now, if we're talking redraft, it's CMC. It's just, this dude had 12 RB1 weeks last year, was the most consistent running back in football. As long as he's healthy, there's no indication that he's not going to be, in the running for RB1 overall. Now, when it comes to Dynasty, Jonathan Taylor is my RB1 because, one, we've seen it. We've seen him be RB1. We've seen him rush for 1,800 yards. We know he can score in multiple different ways. He can catch passes. And he's in an offense that's in what I think is going to be an ascension over the next couple of years with Anthony Richardson. And then Bijan, we just haven't seen him in the NFL. Now, I think he's going to be really good. He was far and away my 101. I'm not taking quarterbacks over him. If I really want the quarterback, I'll try to trade back in rookie drafts. And I think he's really, really good and has the opportunity to be the RB1 in fantasy football and in Dynasty. But I'm not jumping some of these other guys, right? Like, Jonathan Taylor is a running back. You're going to miss 8 games in a season at some point, probably. We've seen it from CMC. We've seen it from Saquon. We saw just 2 years ago, Derrick Henry having problems staying on the field. Like, that happens. And then they come back, and guess what? They're freaking awesome, just like they were before. Saquon, awesome year last year. Derrick Henry, I wrote in my article, like, I've been saying to sell this guy for like 4 seasons. At this point, I'm just done. until when he drops off, he drops off. But I'm not touting the sell horn because the guy just keeps going. Maybe Frank Gore 2.0 over here. And then obviously CMC missed that time. Almost 2 seasons, the same as Saquon, where it was kind of rough. And then comes out last year, and like I said, 12. He had 12 RB1 weeks out of 17 games. And then I think he had 4 RB2 weeks. 3. So 15 out of 17 games that he played were top 24. And 12 of those were RB1. So that's why he's not my RB1 for Dynasty. I still love the prospect, still love the running back, but the veterans are over him. They've proven it. And then once he proves it, I can move him above. But
yeah, my struggle with a guy like CMC as your RB1 is, somebody on the site, maybe on the stream with him right now, wrote curse of 400 touches type articles not too long ago about Christian McCaffrey. And I don't know what that number is. Is it 400 or is it slightly below? Because CMC had well over 350 touches last year. How much does that take effect on his body? I mean, I would rather look a different direction if I'm grabbing an RB at the top there than a guy that is elite, electric, with the ball in his hands, can do it all. Like, I would probably lean more on, although Jonathan Taylor burnt me last year, I would probably lean more on a guy like that than a guy like CMC because he had so much action last year. And I don't want to get bit by that curse of 350 touches, although that's not really a thing. It's 400 on RotoHeat.com. But Bijan is a guy that needs to prove it for me. Atlanta's offense is going to be run heavy, but Tyler Algier proved that he had 4 or 5 RB1 weeks as the season finished out last year. So Tyler Algier is going to get involved in some way. So let's see what this looks like before I say Bijan is, RB1 in redraft or in Dynasty or whatever. So I'm with you. I agree on the Bijan stuff, but I would look a little different direction.
To speak, that's only redraft where I'm taking CMC that high. Any running back can get hurt at any point. I mean, we've seen it. Nobody expected a Jonathan Taylor injury last year. There was no indication that he was going to have one. Dobbins, Breece Hall, like a bunch of young guys that had no work have been hurt over the past few years. Javonte Williams, another young, exciting running back. So, I'm not, when it comes to redraft, I'm not going to be factoring that in. Now, obviously, when we get to Dynasty, I want a younger running back that doesn't have as much wear. So I am going to lean the Jonathan Taylor and the Bijans over the CMCs and Saquons and whatnot. But in redraft, I have no problem. If I'm one, I'm taking CMC. If he gets hurt, all right. I mean, what are you going to do? But it could, even if you take him at 12, he could get hurt. Or even if you take Jonathan Taylor first, he could get hurt, or Bijan. It's just the nature of the position. And that's why actually in the article, I actually lowered the threshold of games played for the running backs to 7 rather than 9 that I used for the wide receivers, because running backs are just generally going to miss a couple games. You're going to get some 17 games played out of some. We got it out of CMC and Austin Eckler, but I think most of the guys in my article missed at least a game, if not 2 to 3. So in redraft, I'm not going to worry about it. I want the guy that's going to just, consistently put up points, and there's no arguing. CMC, just if he's on the field, he's just the best running back in football right now. And I'll take those shots in redraft. But then you got Austin Eckler, who was right above him, who had 11 running back 1 weeks and 4 RB2 weeks, where I'm more concerned about him just because of the size. And he wants to be traded. We haven't heard anything on that front in a while.
Kind of a big deal.
But that would worry me more. But yeah, I've got Jonathan Taylor there at the top, and then Bijan is probably my number 2 right now. But
we're talking Dynasty, not redraft.
Dynasty, yeah. In redraft, I'm taking CMC, probably taking Barkley. Derrick Henry's in the conversation until he's not. It's just, I want to know, and we don't know what Atlanta's going to do either. We thought, they had the best tight end prospect of the last 15 years, and we haven't seen shit. I mean, he hasn't been the guy that everybody wanted him to be so far. So
somewhere Sully is crying.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is he going to get the workload right out the bat? I would expect so, since he was the 8th overall pick, but at the same time, they could be saying we're not quite to the winning space yet, so let's not give him all the touches and run him into the ground before we really need him for playoff pushes. So who knows? It's kind of tough to gauge that first year for him, just because of the situation that he's in, where Atlanta's at. And they do have some other weapons on that. They've got one of the best wide receiver prospects from last year. They got the best tight end prospect from the year before. And they've got a good core of running backs with Cordarrelle Patterson still there. You mentioned Tyler Algier, who was super efficient last year. So it is a big question mark of just how much work he's going to get. The work he gets is probably going to be really damn good. But is it going to be 300 touches, or is it going to be 225 to 250, or does he end up around the 200 mark? It's going to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to it. So the season can start already.
Hey, we get schedule releases tonight, so we already know the Lions and the Chiefs are game number 1 of 256 or whatever it is, 255 games. Go Lions!
Yeah, KC didn't want the Bears to go to Germany with them. They wanted the Bears to bring all their drunks to Arrowhead. Michael says, I've already drafted in 2 leagues. I have 1 more to go next month. Chase Brown, is he the replacement for Joe Mixon? I took him in those league drafts hoping so. You're shaking your head. Yes, you're way more confident than I am. Love it.
I mean, Chris Evans will be involved, right? He's a guy that's been on the roster for a little while. Travion Williams might be a little involved if Mixon really is out the door. But Chase Brown is the better running back by far than either of those two. I mean, he showed us in his time as college. He's a really strong running back. He can do it all. He can be out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He can be a between the tackles guy. He can be a goal line type guy if they need. I mean, they really could. I think they could easily give him 2 to 250 touches, rushing, receiving, whatever, and fill the majority of Joe Mixon's work if they moved on from him. I haven't seen anything say they're going to, unless they have, which they haven't. What do you think?
I'm not big on Chase Brown. I wasn't very excited about him. I don't think that he is a lead back in the NFL. I think he's more of a RB2 fill-in. I don't think they move on from Joe Mixon. This is a team that's still in the middle of a championship window. Joe Mixon is one of the most talented running backs, in my opinion, in the league. Obviously, he's getting a little bit older now. The off-field stuff, like, we heard about it, but then it was reported that he wasn't even there. It was just happened to be his house, so I'm not really worried about that. So, I don't mind taking shots on Chase Brown, right? You got to take shots on these guys that were running backs that were taken in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. We've seen the undrafted running backs really kind of popping off in the last few years. Phillip Lindsay had a couple of years of fantasy relevancy. You've got Austin Eckler, who we just talked about, who is literally like the best running back over the past 2 years in fantasy. And then, last year, Pacheco and Pierce were late round picks, undrafted. So you can get that value out of those late running backs, those undrafted running backs. So I don't mind taking shots on him. I just don't think that he's like a long-term starter in the NFL. I think he's more of a backup, solid backup running back that, when he does start, you can plug in, but I don't think it's going to be something consistent. I'd think more like Alexander Madison's type, backup, looks good, but isn't going to really bring it home if he's the starter.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the team is going to try to compete for a championship. So Joe Mixon gives them the best chance short of legal issues. I mean, that could kind of trump all this stuff if that happens. So,
which I will say, and I haven't seen this, but Michael did say in the chat that the case has been updated and now does involve him. So, it's interesting. I let this stuff play out. We've seen all the Matt Araiza stuff come out this week about how he wasn't even at that party. The guy's NFL career was ruined to some extent. Who knows what's going to happen?
He probably gets another chance just because he was a pretty promising young punter, and this really had nothing to do with him. It sounds like, allegedly.
But he's also a punter, so do you want that circus around your punter? You deal with it. I guess when it's Deshaun Watson,
if it's your quarterback
and all that. But I don't know that a punter is going to get the same leeway, even though it seems like it's absolutely not true. It still brings kind of a circus with it. Everybody's going to want to know all kinds of stuff, right? They're going to ask all kinds of questions to him. So I don't know if that's going to get him back onto an NFL roster. But, the point I was trying to make, though, is I'll just let it play out because we don't know what's true, what's not. We've had similar things happen. Tyreek Hill, when all those tapes came out, and then it became known that it was fabricated, that his woman recorded stuff, cut stuff out to make it sound much different than what was really said.
Right.
So I've just learned my lesson. I just stay out of it. I'll let the court, the NFL, the teams all figure that out, and then I'll make my assumptions and everything afterwards.
But it's always smart to hedge your bets, right? And grab those guys, stash them later. I mean, Chase Brown in the drafts that I've done so far, he's late second, early third. I mean, he's not a guy that's going super, super high, but, in that stashable range, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't mean to say that I don't think he's worth drafting. I could be completely wrong.
Thanks, Michael.
And he could end up being a stud starter. We've seen it. Nobody expected Khalil Herbert to do what he did when he came out, right? He wasn't highly touted. The running backs I mentioned earlier that were undrafted or late, 6th, 7th round picks. It's just I don't think people are paying close enough attention to the NFL and the fact that the draft capital and stuff. Yes, it's important to get the opportunity, but the NFL is moving off of higher draft picks faster than they ever have and giving opportunities to just the better players. So they don't care if you came in the 6th round or the 2nd. If you're better than the guy drafted higher than you, we're going to play you because we want you to win. We've seen it with Pacheco and CEH last year. At some point, Kansas City said, CEH isn't working out. Pacheco's our guy. And they won a freaking Super Bowl.
Let's do it.
Right. So, that's the type of thing I just said this in a chat in our Facebook group. We were talking about Mixon and what's going to happen. And then somebody else was asked if CEH was worth even drafting. And I say yes, late in drafts, any running back that has an opportunity. He's one injury away right now from starting again. But what would be nice is if he got cut, if the Chiefs cut ties, and he ended up in Cincinnati, where we're talking about right now, with his boy Joe Burrow. And they use him the way he was used at LSU. Because they haven't used him that way in Kansas City. So is that a route for him to come back to fantasy relevancy? I think it would be kind of cool to see that reunion, him, Chase, and Burrow together. But maybe he just sucks and he'll never be good. But if you draft him late, you're going to miss on a lot of those guys in his range anyway, right? A lot of them aren't going to have fantasy relevancy, at least long term. So I don't mind taking shots. Do you guys have some win now veterans you are actively trying to trade for in Dynasty now that we have drafts in the books? Looks like Brad is replying to a text there. The first guy that came to my mind was James Conner, at running back. Probably can get him for a third at this point. He's probably going to miss a handful of games. But when that dude is on the field and has been on the field with Arizona, I think only twice last year he didn't catch at least 3 passes. His efficiency dropped, but he's catching enough passes in Arizona that he keeps some flex appeal, RB2 appeal in fantasy football. So for the price, third, fourth round rookie pick, I'll take that on a contending team. And if he's just past the end, the twilight years are there and he's done, it doesn't kill me. It doesn't hurt my roster. If he comes out and he's an RB2, then I got an RB2 to lengthen my roster for a late round rookie pick. So I'm James Conner's at the top of my list, especially at running back.
Well, and did they? I was trying to pull up. I did some trades here recently, so I was trying to pull up some of the players. But did I don't think Arizona really added much to compete with him though, right? Like, so he's kind of still just the guy with, okay depth behind him. I mean, Keontae Ingram and gosh, I can't even think of who else is there. Oh yeah, Corey Clement and Tyson Williams. I mean, they took a free agent undrafted, but it's like he has no real competition. So as long as he's healthy and on the field, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can run the ball. If you can get him for a third or fourth, I would probably even say a late second, right? Like if you're competing and you're in the 2-9 to 2-12 range in a 12 team, or 11 to 14, kind of in those last 3-4 picks, why not try to take a chance on him? I mean, it doesn't hurt with as many running backs get hurt right now as they do. Take a shot. I mean, I would question a guy that I traded for, and I want to know what you think about it, because he's kind of a bigger name, Dalvin Cook. Like right now, I got him for a really fair price. Concerns are he gets released from Minnesota. Talk is maybe goes to Miami. Like if he's on the field this year, he still was very productive last year, right? Like what's your thoughts on other running backs that may have been high-level guys that all of a sudden have some, or Joe Mixon type guy, right? Like all these guys have some sort of red flag situations right now, whether it's team-related, personal-related, whatever. But if you can get them for a fair price, why not?
Dalvin Cook, it's weird because Dalvin's numbers were kind of relative and similar to his past numbers last year, but he was bad in the second half. Over the final 8 weeks, he was RB2 or better only twice. So he had 6 finishes outside the top 24. And now we don't know what's going to happen. But the first half of last season, he had 3 RB1 finishes, 4 RB2, and only 2 outside the top 24. So which Dalvin are we going to get? Are we going to get first half of 2022, or are we going to get second half of 2022? So that's the kind of thing that makes me nervous, because it was literally almost split right down the middle. He hit midseason and then
wheels fell
plummeted.
off.
So is that the indicator that the end is near for him? A lot of the other veteran running backs that made the consistency report didn't have like first half, second half splits like that. They were, kind of up and down throughout the whole year. So they still had some productive weeks at the end of the year and some productive weeks at the beginning of the year. But his was like split down the middle, just like somebody flipped a switch. And after that, it was very, very tough in regards to fantasy. So I don't blame anybody for taking a shot on him, because if you do get first half Dalvin, you get a top 5 running back.
But if you get second half Dalvin, you don't get an RB3.
Right. So there's risk there. And this happens with all aging running backs, right? Like a lot of times they just hit a wall. There's no like gradual decrease in their production. It's like, dude, this guy's awesome. And then like, boom, what happened? Why is he not good anymore? But sometimes your body just says, hey, you've been in way too many car crashes and I need to take an ice bath and take a break. What about wide receivers? Are there any wide receivers, or was there another running back you wanted to?
Well, no, I was looking at your article just to refresh myself, because I read it when you dropped it. But Zeke Elliott's sitting right at 15.
Yeah, and again,
what does that mean for us?
It's another thing where it was just the consistency, and he hasn't had like top end fantasy scorer production in a while. I think I wrote in here, I don't even think he had a 20-point game last year. I don't even think he had one. I think 18.7 was his highest. Is that was that him or somebody else? I don't know.
I
It all
believe
ran
so.
together. Oh, he never once scored more than 18.5 points last year. So he gave you the consistency. He was an RB1 5 times, was an RB2 4 times, but it was a lot of touchdowns that got him there. So if he's not in a Cowboys offense, is he going to have that same touchdown upside if he gets signed by somebody? He's still waiting. There's been rumors he could go back to Dallas on a smaller contract. And
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay. He'll end up somewhere and get an opportunity, but who knows what we're going to get. You're not going to get the high end weeks out of him, but if he is starting and getting enough work, he's probably going to be a flex option for your team. But I wouldn't rely on him to be one of my top 2 running backs at this point.
So do you think if he gets something in like 10 to 12 touches a week that he's flexible? I mean, do you think so looking at your running back list, is there kind of a magic number that if a guy gets, X amount of touches is kind of the spot for at least flexing on up?
So this isn't saying like who's the best fantasy running backs, right? Like he's not my 15th favorite fantasy running back.
Right, just consistency.
Just looking at last year, basically what I did was I broke it down by week, right? Because each week's different. You've got different teams playing when bye weeks kick in. There's different injuries, different running backs have missed time. So the big key of it is figuring out where that player finished in regards to RB1, RB2, or outside of that scope during each specific week. And then I have different values attached to kind of normalize that score so we get the consistency score. So I don't want people to be confused and be like, oh, well, Ezekiel Elliott's the 15th best running back going into 2023. This is just showing how they performed and gives you an idea, right? Like if it can be used for DFS. If you look at Ezekiel Elliott and he gets a starting job somewhere next year, you probably don't want to use him in a tournament in DFS because he's not going to get you the high-end score. He never really has. He's never been that type of running back. He wasn't a big play running back. And the only way for him to get you to 20-plus points is to score 2 to 3 touchdowns at this point of his career. And he didn't catch a lot of passes last year, which was a disappointment because he's done that in the past. So it just kind of gives you an idea when you're going to start, like where do these guys normally fall? And this is the first year of this iteration, so we don't even know if it's sticky information from season to season yet, right? We don't know how long a guy stays this consistent, like on average. So it's not an indicator of the best running backs in the league necessarily. It's just who was consistently finishing as a startable running back in leagues where you have to start 2. And then bonus points for being an RB1, scoring X amount of points, and then the amount of non-top 24 finishes that you have in there.
I dig it. Good stuff.
Facebook user says, so I'm in a money keeper league. You lose the round you draft the player in 6-point pass TDs, 0.5 PPR. Current keepers, 4th round, Austin Eckler, and 5th round, JT. I'm debating on trading Eckler to get the 102 so that I can land Travis Kelce or Bijan. This would make me keep Lamar as my second keeper. Thoughts? Can you let us know what round Lamar was in? I'm assuming it was 1st or 2nd round though. In a 6-point pass TD. If it's a super flex, that's what I don't know. So it would depend where he was taken. If it's not a super flex, I'm not keeping a quarterback.
9th round for Lamar.
9th round for Lamar. Okay. 9th round, I would consider. I would like to know who else are options, though. What were you saying, Brad?
It's a 1 QB.
Well, once he said 9th round, I figured it was one QB. There ain't
Yeah.
no way you're getting him in the 9th. And if it was 9th in a super flex, I'm saying keep him.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question because if you're half point PPR, I mean, in a bubble, if you're looking to compete this year and you feel like your team is ready, I mean, I'm okay with kind of taking Austin Eckler and turning it into Kelsey because you have JT already there. I guess, and some of it kind of depends on your starting situations, what your roster looks like. I mean, there's a lot of questions about your roster that we don't necessarily have the answers to. In a nutshell, I'm fine with trading Austin Eckler for the 102 if you are for sure getting Kelsey or Bijan. I would, well, debatable with Bijan, but definitely for Kelsey because of the half point PPR side of it. You don't like that?
No, I'm not. I'm not taking the tight end in a half point PPR.
So what are you doing there at the 102?
I'll take Bijan. I'll go Bijan over Eckler in a keeper. But I'm not going Kelsey. I'm not taking Kelsey over Bijan. Older tight end. It's only 0.5 PPR. So he's devalued from a full point PPR. And Bijan's just going to give you more at the running back position, I think, than Kelsey at the tight end. I think you can get tight end elsewhere. Obviously, Kelsey's like a wide receiver, but you can get a positional advantage at running back too. And if you have JT and Bijan, two guys that could be 2 of the 3, 4 top running backs in the league this year, then I'm doing that. And, you're going to lose, the round pick for keeping Bijan next year. But I definitely don't want to keep keeping Travis Kelce at that price point from year to year either. So if I'm going to make that move, I want to get the guy that I plan on keeping, even though I'm losing that high draft capital for a few more years, right?
I get it. I guess in my mind, trying to think of the value proposition of the fact that you're not getting a tight end remotely close to Travis Kelce's production or value for a year. So I'm thinking, how do we win now if this team is ready to compete? You don't get a tight end that's even remotely close to Kelce potentially in value, right? Like, how do you replace that production if you're? So I'm looking at this. I'm saying, okay, his team must need a tight end if he's really willing to take a big swing and go after the top guy. How do you replace that level of production at tight end? Do you just hope that one of these rookies goes off?
You can get it at other positions. That's what a lot of people forget. Like, you don't like Bijan over starting. Let's say it ends up being, let's just say it ends up being Deonta Foreman. I don't know who this guy's got. I don't know who the other options are at running back.
Sure, right.
But let's just say that that's the position that you end up in. Bijan over him is probably going to be the same difference as Kelsey over the tight end 8, right? But you can go out like, I would rather go acquire a cheaper Mark Andrews or Darren Waller, who I love the situation that he's going in New York, or some of the younger guys that are coming up, like Freiermuth he's been one of your favorites, but he hasn't been one of mine, but he is now getting disrespected in fantasy, I think. And you can go and get those guys at a much cheaper price and build your depth at wide receiver and tight end. And you're getting the potential number 1 player in all of fantasy in Bijan. And who knows how long Travis Kelce is going to be this type of tight end. So I really, if I'm going to use the 102 and I'm going to have to lose that draft pick for the next couple years, I don't want to just take it for the one guy 1 year and then let him go. I want to get the guy that, if I give up my first round pick the next couple of years, is a guy that is worth it. And I think that's Bijan. I think he holds the value for a couple of years. And I don't know that Kelsey will. Kelsey's obviously really, really good. But he loses a little bit of value going from 1 point PPR to 0.5. And I think they may have some more options emerging in that offense as well, with the way they used Jerick McKinnon in the second half of last year, with Sky Moore going into his second year. It seems like Rashee Rice is quickly becoming a favorite of Patrick Mahomes, and that does not hurt anybody if that ends up coming to fruition. I'm not calling it and saying it will, but if he does, I mentioned Austin Collie in the Colts and Peyton Manning. Austin Collie wasn't the most talented, but Peyton Manning loved him because he did the shit right. And without the concussions, probably would have had a pretty solid career in Indianapolis. If Rashee Rice is that guy for Patrick Mahomes, giddy up.
Well, and he even, I mean, if you listen to Mahomes in the offseason, he's even talking about Justin Ross, right? Like that was a guy who was hot in college, and then obviously, had some injury issues there. So there's lots of options. Is absolutely, I agree with that sentiment. And what does that do to Travis Kelce? I don't hate, if you're going 102, go with the highest upside potential long term. I was trying to think, as looking at this, I was trying to look, okay, how do we get this guy a championship this year? And obviously this isn't the only thing you would do. I mean, who knows if this would even get him there, but it's an interesting question to have. If your team's ready to compete, what do you do if you can acquire early picks in league formats like this?
And keepers take the best young player that high. I just think that those picks are way too valuable. The thing that confuses me is that if it was just a startup draft, Bijan's going to go in the first round, right? 106. Bijan may not even be here though. 101, I don't know who's on the board, but 101 may be Bijan, whoever's taken, picking first in that draft. But nobody's taking Bijan in a startup draft behind Kelce, right? Kelce's, unless it's a tight end premium, 1.5, 1.75, tight end premium,
right?
Bijan's never going after Kelce. So in this situation, why are we going to switch that up and take Kelce over Bijan? That's the hard part for me. I'd be taking Bijan, which
hopefully that helps you, Facebook user.
I have to look and see who that was. Obviously, you should always let a draft come to you, quote unquote, naturally. But is there a specific draft strategy you prefer for Dynasty, running back or wide receiver heavy? And do you prefer to win now or build for year 2 to 3?
So I'm probably going. I tend to try to immediately win. Like I try to build a balanced roster with some youth and some veterans. I don't tend to stick to the RB or wide receiver heavy or zero RB. I kind of see where my league mates are drafting. So if this is a startup situation, I have no problem. I mean, for instance, in a mock that I'm doing, I went, and this is super flex, but I went quarterback in the first round, and then I turned around and went wide receiver, running back. Then I grabbed another quarterback. Then I went running back, wide receiver. Like I tend to let the board fall, and I target the guys that I want to build my roster around. There are some veterans sprinkled in there. There's some young guys sprinkled in there. I try to look young running backs, and I try to look kind of in the 25 to 27 when it comes to wide receivers. And then quarterback, I just try to go with the guy that I like the most long term. What do you say?
Okay, so I obviously when I have my tiers when I go into a draft, and I'll use age as a tiebreaker, but I'm never like using that as like if I have a guy in tier 3, I'm not going to use age to jump him above a guy that might be 3 years older that's in tier 2, right? I'm trying to take the most valuable player I can at every pick. I do prefer to go wide receiver heavy early in my drafts. I've seen just too many times because of the injuries at running back where you can get veterans way too cheap in Dynasty. 2 years ago, Lenny Fournette and James Conner won me one of the championships that I had. They were my main 2 running backs going into the season and were just solid throughout. But I had Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs. Who else did I have on that team? Well, I did have Travis Kelce in that one, but it is a tight end premium. And then those veteran running backs. So it's very unique to each league. I try to do the opposite of what my league's doing, right? I zig when they zag. So if they're going wide receiver heavy, I'm gonna take the running back value that's fallen to me. And a lot of times what that'll do is it'll create a run and kind of stop the wide receiver run and get me some wide receiver value, even though a lot of the guys that I wanted were taken off the board earlier. So I think you just really have to feel the draft out, have a plan, but have a plan B as well. Okay, well, if this happens and in the first round, 8 of the 12 picks are wide receivers, maybe in the second round, I do need to prioritize in my tier the running back over the wide receiver. But no matter what, I'm never going to drop a tier just to pick a guy because it's a specific position. So once my tiers are done, if I have a guy in this tier higher, I'm taking him no matter what the position is. I'll worry about filling out the positions later. You've got time, especially if you're drafting right now before the season starts, to make moves if you have extra guys. So that's kind of the way I look at it is, here's what I would love to do. And then if that doesn't work out, I'm going to pivot to this, but never am I going to take a player I think is a worse fantasy player for me just because I happen to not have somebody at that position right now. I'll trade where I have strengths and figure that out. But that's my view on the whole thing.
Yeah. There you go. And so there's that. I mean, and in the end, always be on the lookout for a trade to happen, right? Like as soon as my drafts are over, I'm already kind of resetting my roster and looking, okay, well, what do I need to work on? What do I need to improve?
Real quick, that's just because you're a bad drafter and you're immediately like, damn it, I did not draft well. I need to improve this.
I mean, I took Travis Kelce over Bijan, so obviously I need to find a running back now.
I'm just kidding, but it was just, you put it on a tee for me.
That's the only shot you're hitting off the tee, I bet.
Dude, I'm terrible hitting the ball off the tee. So,
yeah. So but I will always pivot. Like I have no problem going off my board, which is why a lot of people, especially like this weekend in my home league, they pulled up my rankings on RotoHeat, and I was watching them, and they're looking at my rankings. Then they went, "Why did you take that guy? He's higher on your rankings." I was like, I don't care what my ranking said. I went with the guy that I chose here. I can't follow my board all the time because people are always going to try to steal my guys.
I don't know. I'm the opposite. Like and it's tiers too, right? So you may have a group of guys that are like super duper close, and maybe you haven't taken or you don't have any shares of that guy, but they're in the same tier. So maybe in your rankings, he is a little bit lower, but he's in the same tier. But, obviously with our rankings, and we are working on getting tiers involved in the future. But, if people don't see that, I'm just not leaving my tier. If I have these guys in a tier and it goes from, 20 to 28, I may take number 28 ahead of the other 7.
Sure.
But they're all so close that it's minute. What I'm not going to do is take the guy that's at 38 and in tier 5 over the guy that's 28 and in tier 4.
I don't argue that. I kind of look at my board, even the boards that we have on RotoHeat, I kind of have it tiered off in my mind when I'm in a draft, so I know which group of guys I like and where. So yeah, easy peasy,
well,
lemon squeezy.
That's gonna be it. We're gonna call it a day. We appreciate everybody coming out, asking the questions.
Good questions.
And Brad, I appreciate you filling in for Thomas. He's soft.
Always glad to help.
I had to call off work.
He's soft. I mean, Thomas is the man. I love him, but always glad to help.
Thomas
for sure.
Is great, but we appreciate it because I wasn't coming on and doing it by myself. That's like the worst thing ever. I don't know if people realize that, but doing a solo pod is like, just go ahead, rip my heart out, bury me in the ground.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I tried it once and never again.
It's tough.
Again.
I do it about 2-3 times a year, but we will be back next Thursday. But tonight there will be a more organized show at 5 p.m. with the Dynasty Heat Seekers. Make sure you tune in 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen, we are switching a ton of stuff up here on YouTube. Please hit that like, subscribe, notification bell. Brad, just keep on making a bunch of noise while I'm talking. It's okay. But But yeah, we have a lot of changes coming. We have a lot of changes coming to the website. We appreciate all the support that you guys have given us, and we look forward to showing you some of these new features and new content that we are drumming up right now. We're ready for the 2023 season.
Let's go.
Now that the draft's over, now that our rookie drafts are going and getting heated up, startups coming up, it's going to be a fun rest of the off season, and then we get to really have the fun and watch me win all my leagues because everybody that's in them sucks.
Dang.
Oh wait, you're in multiple? My bad.
I guess I better quit now while I'm ahead.
Oh, I'm just kidding. But we're gonna call
Live in
it.
fear.